Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil ameen, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Listeners, welcome back to the Verbal Outpost. As always, you've got your regular host in today, Hamza, and as always, I've got my usual partner in crime with me, Shafiq, in the studio today. We'll do a quick mic check to make sure.
Assalamu alaikum.
There we are.
That working all right?
That's working all good, man.
Better than last time.
Much better than last time. So you're either listening to us live on Radio Dawn 107.6 or you're watching us on YouTube. So you can get us on YouTube now as well. We've slightly modernized over the past few weeks. So you can check us out on YouTube. Not live, but we'll be on in the next week. You can get us on the Verbal Outpost. If you're listening live, you can join in the conversation today. The number is 0115 8411 800. 0115 8411 900. That's the other number. And then we've got a WhatsApp number as well, but I don't think that's working. I'm not going to attempt it. That's a little bit too much for me.
Sorry, give you a private number, right?
Privately. Yeah, that's not going to work. I've done that before. It's backfired. We've got a guest in the studio with us today. We have none other than Azar Hussain with us today. How are you doing, Azar?
I'm good. Assalamu alaikum. I thought you were going to say a special guest, and then you pulled out at the last moment.
I thought I did say special. No, I think it was subconsciously. How are you doing anyway?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good.
Good man. Everything good. So if you don't know Azar, which unfortunately some of you won't know him, which is a real shame, but quick intro. Father of four, born and raised in Nottingham, works in software engineering, tech recruitment, and has run Rebel Recruiters for the past 8 years. So we're going to touch on that in a moment. Employing 12 people in Nottingham city centre, so it's a good, nice sized business. Azar also used to be a football coach as well for Sherwood FC for the past 10 years. That's quite a while, man. That's a long time.
I did my time.
You did your time.
I did my time. Hung my boots up, my coaching coat up a few weeks ago. I got two boys, mashallah, 13 and 17, so coached them for a number of years. But then, just decided I needed some time for myself, and I think they probably decided they needed some time away from me. So I'm free. I'm free now on Saturdays. And
free agent now. No, that's good. That's good. And so apparently you picked up golf recently.
So I learned.
So hold on. Let me just frame this correctly, right? So you've had some you're starting to get some of those old men pains now.
Yeah.
Right in your knees,
which you know about Portugal, right?
I will. They're on their way out.
Okay.
Mine are on their way out. I'm still riding out the final bit of it, but you're now getting into golf.
Yeah.
Recently, how's that going?
It's going okay. I've still got a few. It's a hard game. It's a hard game to learn, but I got into golf because actually I didn't know that there are lots of Muslims around the UK that do actually play golf. I always assume that it's going to be like an old, stuffy, like white person sport, but I'm part of there's a Muslim Golf Association that my friend runs. They events in the UK.
Interesting.
Some really like spectacular events. So I thought, why not? I can't play football anymore, so let's take this new sport up.
How long have you been doing it?
About a year and a half.
A year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. And whereabouts do you play?
All over the place. So we went out to Turkey earlier this year.
Oh, okay.
And a place called Belek, and spent 5 days out there. SubhanAllah, absolutely beautiful. But then in the UK, we played in London, in Liverpool, in Scunthorpe the other week as well. So, just imagine a bunch of 80 Muslim bearded guys taking over your traditional country golf club. It's kind of unique. So it's good fun.
Have you taken? Let me pick my words carefully here. Have you? What golf courses do you play in Nottingham locally? Do you do anything locally?
Yeah,
in the UK.
So the one around the corner from where I live in Mapley.
There's one. Is that the one? What's it called? The one in Gedling, Mapley Golf Club.
surprisingly enough.
The one in Gedling, right?
Yes,
Is that one?
Border, yeah.
On the border, right? And then there's another one in Woollerton, right?
There's loads.
And then there's one in...
There's one near Showcase, right?
Yeah, that's where people kind of go to, like the driving.
That's the driving range.
Yeah, just to kind of practice.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, you know what? It's a whole other world. You realize that, you know, for a lot of non-Muslims, golf is part of the kind of week, and you go to these courses and you're like, subhanallah, like these guys have access to really nice facilities and they have a really nice time there, and a lot of it's on our doorstep. And part of the thing about the Muslim Golf Association, which my friend Amir runs, is giving Muslims access to these spaces that traditionally were kind of off limits to Muslims. So
that's interesting. I always thought finance was a barrier for a lot of Muslims to get into golf.
yeah, I think maybe, you know, 2 or 3 decades ago, Muslims have money nowadays. You know, they spend it on, you know, cars and holidays to Dubai. Like, you know, spending on a few rounds of golf, I don't think's out of the question.
Yeah, great stuff. So actually, you know what we typically do? We typically do a game of this or that. I think you've kind of nicely bypassed that. I don't think we need to do that.
Good.
We've got a great intro on you already, man. We already know.
I heard like you do like some like ketchup or mayonnaise questions.
That's the favorite of Ham. That's the favorite of Ham's is the ketchup.
I mean, you had a couple, but no, I think
just so you know, it's mayonnaise all the way.
It's mayonnaise. You don't do ketchup. No, fair enough. Coffee, tea.
So traditionally tea.
Okay.
I've always liked the idea of drinking coffee though, like something that obviously I don't smoke cigars, but it's kind of got that kind of refined image about it. So yeah, so I've started drinking coffee recently actually. So I'm not quite addicted, but yeah, it's on its way, I reckon.
Okay. Is that coming with age?
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a pattern here. You getting towards your 40s? Have you hit 40 yet?
I'm 42 next week.
42 next week, right? Okay, so a couple of years past the 40. Okay, all right. So you're getting into...
It's all a bit where you meant to say you don't look it by that way. I'm not a special guest, and I definitely look 42 there.
Thankfully, we've got cameras in the studio, so you got to check out YouTube to make a call on that. But no, I would
still in your youth, though, isn't it? 40.
40.
Yes, I'm 2 years into being a man, actually. Isn't that you become a man at 40? So I'm only 2 years old as a man in that case.
Yeah. So listen, man, tell us. It's good to have you in the studio. Recruitment. How did you get into recruitment in the first place?
Yes, it was a bit of a weird one, really. So I went to university. I was the first person in my family to go to university in 1999. So I went to Manchester. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Studied government and politics because it involved the least amount of actual knowledge, and you could actually wing it on opinions, which you know, as you well know, gets you far in life. But so after I left there, I did well academically, but I didn't really have any kind of I didn't have anyone in my family that was a professional, any guidance, anyone to kind of look up to. So I found myself falling into sales. So I worked for 18 months in a sales role, typical kind of sales lifestyle, you know, on the road, nice company car, eating pasties for lunch, you know, and then realized that I like being around people. You know, that for me is, I think that was something that I was good at, and I wasn't getting enough of it in my last job. So the idea of recruitment obviously is people focused, and I didn't really know too much about it, but I did know that you spend your days speaking to people, working with people, and solving people problems. So I just kind of fell into it, and then, you know, did well, stayed with my company for probably longer than I should have. But, you know, when you've not had a stable upbringing, the idea of having a stable income is very intoxicating.
Interesting.
And, you know, I was continued progressing, doing really well, hitting the targets, started managing a team, you know, started becoming like fully aligned to that kind of corporate life. But, you know, I think it reached a point where, you know, you feel like you're doing your job, and you're obviously doing well, but you don't feel kind of realized or self-realized, or, you know, you don't get that sense of purpose. So then I decided to pack it in and start my own business.
And that was about 8 years ago?
Yeah.
How's it been since? Because, I mean, that's quite a What was it like taking the plunge?
I'll
Did it feel like taking the plunge at the time, or was it fairly
Listen,
just a natural
I'm not
progression?
afraid to admit that I got to a point, and I think hopefully I'm not the only one. Well, I say hopefully I'm not the only one. It's not a good thing, but a lot of my identity was tied up into my job and what I did. How can it not be? You wake up, you go to work at 8:30, you come home at 6, 7 o'clock at night, and you do that for years on end. It inevitably becomes part of your identity, right? And for me, when that switch was turned off and I handed my notice in and wanted to do my own business, I had a real identity crisis, like, what do I do now? How do I do this? And I didn't have mentors or people that I knew that had set up professional businesses. So, yeah, the period after handing my notice in, I think for about 3 months, probably one of the hardest points in my life.
So how far had the idea of Rebel Recruiters gotten when you handed in your resignation? Was this just an idea in your head? Is this something you'd had a full business plan? Is it just an idea in your head?
I'm one of those people that I tend to be kind of all in. So if I'm at work, I'm all in, and I find it very difficult to kind of balance different priorities. And that's a fault of mine. But it just meant the minute that I left, that's when the planning started.
Okay.
So
3 months of planning.
Identity crisis,
And that
waking up and thinking I'm going to pay the bills, that kind of thing.
Parallel.
Yeah.
How did you navigate all of that? I mean, how did you overcome that mental strain? Because you've talked about you had that income that's coming in.
Yeah.
You've got a level of stability. You talked about having quite some turbulence whilst growing up. We'll touch on that a little bit later. It'd be interesting to find out a bit more. But you've got this period of stability, and then you kind of give it up. Is that maybe? I mean, what were people saying around you?
I think there were people around me that were, kind of concerned, questioning whether I was doing the right thing. And, I think as a man, you've got to make your own decisions. I think sometimes, if you take on too much advice, and especially if it's conflicting, it just slows your mind down. So for me, I was really naive, but I made the decision. And the way I got through it was, actually, I look back and I'm like, it was a good thing for me, because I didn't realize how much of my identity was tied up with work. And I think so many Muslims actually, speaking to them, like, you realize I can see now that they're going through things I was going through a few years ago, where, if you take the work out of their life, they almost lose their sense of purpose. So the way I got through it is just got my head down and did the work. That's it. You can't think your way out of these situations. If you're facing a big obstacle, you've just got to write down what you need to do, shut up and get it done.
There's a couple of amazing things that I'm thinking of. So, I mean, we had Faisal Amjad on a few weeks ago, Shaf remote. So he was on, and we had quite a detailed conversation about enterprise and, as a Muslim community, how we're kind of taught from a very young age there's a traditional career path, and you follow that traditional career path. And I hope I'm phrasing Faisal Amjad correctly. If not, Faisal Amjad, feel free to
call in. Live.
Yeah, feel free to call in and correct me. But he was talking about Nottingham and saying it's not very conducive to enterprise, and he was saying that it's quite difficult because there's this game of playing it quite safe in life. Yeah. And that could be because of the way we're raised in first generation immigrants coming in and the backgrounds they came from, manual laborers. So we're talking a little bit about that. So it's interesting in your case. I mean, having to, you're bucking the trend, doing something a little bit different. Second thing, it'd be interesting to talk about identity as well, because that's another thing that we touched on as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah. But definitely, I think, I was joking about the golf earlier, trying to not go your typical kind of Pakistani way and fade into the sunset, but instead take up a new sport that traditionally white people play. But one of the major things everyone knows about golf is that big players play golf, right? in industry. And if you go to any country in the world, so many business decisions are made on the golf course. So one of the things that I've learned actually through playing golf is I've actually had a chance to meet lots of aspirational Muslims that have done really, really good things. People that, for my industry, it's business to business, right? So there isn't a lot in Nottingham that aren't many people that I can learn from. So it has given me a chance to meet those people. I'm guessing Faisal has spent a lot of time with people in places like Birmingham and London, where there's maybe more of a, I don't know, they're like 20 or 30 years ahead of us. But yeah, no, I can absolutely relate to that. When I was setting my business up, I didn't have any mentors. There weren't, the trail hadn't been blazed before in Nottingham, so it kind of felt quite lonely. And I think there's things that we can do about that as a city. We have so much talent and ability, and mashallah, lots of aspirational Muslims coming through. We just need to we've got to get better at a city of bringing people together. I think everyone's kind of siloed at the moment, which is a problem.
I would completely agree with that. That's so. I've spent time down in London, and I think that's fair to say it's slightly ahead of where we are at the moment. I feel like it's siloed. It's very siloed here. People like to play it relatively safe, and you go into your career and you stick to that career, and that becomes part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And you go into a little bit of a bubble. You just building your own career path, and you don't debate unless you're in a B2B sales type job, which there's not many people that look like us in B2B sales jobs, or where it's people skills. It's typically STEM subjects where it's brain power and processing ability. So typically it has been quite siloed. How do you think we can resolve that as a community, or particularly within Nottingham? I mean, is there any way to address some of those challenges, bring people together?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, we are 20 or 30 years behind other cities, and that's just purely because of the size of the community that we have here. But what I would say is the Nottingham that we live in now is very different to the one that you and I grew up in, right? 20, 30 years ago. If you look around you, I always say to my kids, my boys, that, I grew up, I didn't know any Arabs or any Africans or any Indonesians, or now you guys are going to school with Muslims from all these different places. It's a different world, and there's a massive opportunity there. But I think the big thing that we've got to try and do is, we've got a lot of Muslims that lived in places like Forest Fields, Lenton, Sneinton, right? They went to school, college, did well, and then, like me, probably first people in their families to go to university. And then what do? They move out of those areas, right? They go from Lenton and move to Aspley. From Sneinton, they might move to Bakersfield. Right?
Yeah.
We all know the drill, right? And then what happens, they get very comfortable, they've got stability, they've got income, and it's almost like there's a brain drain in our community going on. And I think what we need to do is encourage those people to come and connect with the next generation, because we have got so much talent here in the city. It's just intact.
I'm just going to pause for one moment. We've got to go to an Azar break.
Okay.
So I'm just going to pause. We'll continue the conversation in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're listening to the Verbal Outpost. We've got myself, Hamza, Shafiq, and our special guest in the studio. Special guest, Azar Hussain, in the studio with us. We are talking. I don't think I need to keep it summary. Let's just get straight into it. I mean, Azar's got quite a, I was going to say colourful past, not a colourful past, but
what you've been reading.
Yeah. There's some interesting things. There's some interesting perspectives. It's the things that we've talked about in the past as well on the radio. Rebel recruiters, I want to talk a little bit more about that, actually. Just before the break, we're talking about how we can do more in the community. But just before we get to that, I want to talk a bit more about rebel recruiters. It's a little bit different. That's why. Okay. So what I'm thinking, in Nottingham, and I think to an extent in most of the cities as well, I think it's slightly changing in the larger cities, but typically people either go through traditional career paths, okay, and they're typically the STEM type subjects. Then you've got people who go down the business route, and it's typically retail, okay, or it will be some form of manufacturing.
Yeah.
it's typically
Some of the more traditional older industries.
yes, yeah.
The emerging industries.
It's kind of you know the blue collar type stuff.
Yeah.
I say in air quotes, right? So it's kind of the blue collar stuff, but you've done something a little bit different. It's considered service sector, which is a bit different. It's considered white collar. You've got 12 people working at the company, so it's grown to a considerable size. In Nottingham, that's quite rare. So, I mean, have you got any advice just for anybody listening? If there's somebody a little bit younger from the next generation down,
Yeah.
we're getting on a bit now.
Old.
We're getting a little bit old, but if there's somebody from the next generation down who wants to set up their own business and they want to set up a consultancy,
Yeah.
a management consultancy, right? They've spent a few years as a consultant and they want to go and do it on their own. I don't just mean contractor because everyone's been doing that for the past 10 years, but actually they want to build something and create real value, B2B, and have something that they can build from the bottom up. What advice would you give to somebody like that? Because we're not seeing it.
No, we're not. And here's the thing, like the world's moving in that direction. So, I think if you look at, I was mentioning this earlier, isn't it? It's like, why do we not have Muslims represented in these kind of more emerging industries? And I think part of it is because we do what we know, right? So, all of us will know someone who runs some kind of takeaway or has, maybe a manufacturing business, or, he's a doctor or he's a lawyer. So we'll all know people like that. We don't know people that are running management consultancies. We don't know people that are running that many business-to-business services companies. But if you look at the UK, what is the UK known for? The UK is known for the services industry. Yeah. So it makes sense that if we're going to call this our home, like we need to get a foothold in those markets. But we don't do it because there's a lack of mentoring, there's a lack of coaching. Because I'll be honest with you, like working in the services business, it's not easy. If you're running a manufacturing business, your inputs and the outputs can be measured on a spreadsheet, right? Working in the services business it's in some ways it's a lot more complex. So we do need more mentoring, we do need more coaching, and I think we need young people to realize, look, you don't want to be if you're bright, you're ambitious, you don't want to be a doctor, you don't want to be a lawyer, you don't want to take over the family, manufacturing business, whatever it is. There is a whole host of opportunities out there for you, but it's going to be harder for you than it is going to be for, I don't know, like a white middle class kid that maybe has got uncles and aunties that have been working in the sectors for a long time. So you need to be prepared to graft and learn really quickly. And that's what I had to do.
That's slightly changing with the next generation though, right? Because there's a fair bit of affluence now. So there's many people that did go into those careers 20 years ago and have done quite well for themselves and who are now putting their kids, for example, through really good private education. Yeah. So it's gradually happening, isn't it? With the next generation. It's gradually happening.
And I think the biggest thing is what we as I mentioned earlier in part one, like we have so much talent and ability in the city, and we have lots of aspirational people that have done well. And I think as a city, what we've got to try and do is connect those to the next generation. Like I said, me 20 years ago when I was first starting out, if I had a mentor, someone that could kind of show me, help me navigate this path, I would have 100% got to where I needed to get to a lot quicker. But there weren't many around then. But as you say now, we do have more people working at consultancies, at business-to-business services. But what we don't have yet is that connection between them and the next generation, where we can pass that knowledge down, and make it easier for the next generation.
I tell you who does it really well so I lived in East London for a number of years, and I was a mentor at Tower Hamlets College, and one of the most deprived areas in the UK, very low levels of literacy, numeracy, just every stat that you can think of. The college was one of the largest colleges. I think it was one of the largest colleges in Tower Hamlets, but it was a big one. And they had a fantastic mentoring scheme because you've got Canary Wharf just literally just next door.
You can see it,
yeah. So it's just next door. So they had very good links with Canary Wharf, the city, And there's a lot of that cross-pollination that happened. So kids would come in, they'd see these things, and a lot of them ended up there. A lot of them.
Yeah.
So that was a very good example that I saw of it. And I think the other thing as well is when you do get young Muslims going into it, you don't want them to sell their soul. So it's one of those where you want them to maintain their identity as well. And I think with our generation, but this is just my opinion, I think there was an element of that. I think there's an element of you kind of have to sell your soul to go down that.
Listen, I remember when I first started working as a recruitment consultant in software engineering and tech. A week after, my director found out I didn't drink, and he took me into the other room, and he said, "What's this I hear about you not drinking?" And I was like, "I don't drink." And he's like, "Yeah, that's going to be a problem." And I was like, how is it going to be a problem? He's like, well, yeah, it was because, and to be fair, like from his point of view, it was a problem because all of the bonding, all of the kind of, extracurricular kind of activities were all involving alcohol. And then you've got this young 22-year-old, bit of a chip on his shoulder, says, I ain't doing that, and it was, so the odds were stacked against me. They were waiting to get rid of me. And I had to give them reasons not to get rid of me that other people didn't have to give. And, I knew they would say things like, oh, well, so-and-so's a Muslim in the other office, and he goes out with the best of them. I'm like, okay, I don't really want to comment on the state of his deen, but, we're not meant to do that. So I was the odd one out. And actually, that's why my business is called Rebel, because I was, when I was growing up in these environments, I was always seen as Rebel, the odd one out. And it was something that kind of made me who I was. But thankfully now, in most businesses, you've got Gordy, you've got non-Muslims that don't drink as well. So, we don't feel so isolated. There's still a few barriers, but it certainly wasn't the case that how it was 20 odd years ago.
So we're talking about 2003, that's around
2004, 2005, that's what I started.
That was around the time of the Iraq War. It's that heightened tensions.
What a time to be alive.
It was a very different time back then, wasn't it? Interesting. I've never experienced anything on that level.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, never on that level. There's always a little bit.
There's so many stories I can tell you, honestly.
Go for it.
I had one interview where I was interviewing for a job, and the lady just looked under the table and she looked at my trousers and she went, "Are you Muslim?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Aren't you meant to wear trousers above your ankles?" What? So does that mean you're not a good Muslim? And this was literally the first question in the interview.
Wow.
And I was like, no, I've not heard of that rule, to be honest with you. But she, "Oh, you don't drink that, do you?" I said, "No, I don't drink." And then, anyway, I thought I smashed the rest of the interview, but then she turned around and said, "Yeah, it's not going to fit in it." So...
That's something that put off a lot of Muslims as well.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, even now,
because telling me serves you right for trying to, go into these places where you're never going to fit in, you're never going to do well, so.
No doubt you're changing the trend, right? In a small way within Nottingham.
Yeah.
Is that trend on a macro level changing as well, where within the sales and the other client servicing?
Yeah. So one of the big changes, obviously I've been privileged to speak to thousands of professionals across different industries over the last 20 odd years I've been doing this job. And I've never ceased to amaze me how, as a community, like the odds are stacked against us, but we still manage to be successful. If you look at even obviously traditional fields like engineering and medicine, but also within tech, the industry that I work in, we have so many Muslims that are doing amazing things and progressing. But as I was mentioning to you earlier, there does seem to be like we're overrepresented at the bottom within tech, for example. So entry-level roles, junior roles, mid-level career roles, there's lots of Muslims, but we don't seem to progress as easily in those kind of mid-senior management and leadership positions.
Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it is to do with, we're learning on the job. We're learning how to network. We're learning how to navigate within a company. I can't just go home and say to my dad, listen, I'm not really progressing. And he says, look, son, what you need to do is take the chief exec out on the golf course and do this and that and the other. And unfortunately, it's a skill. Knowing how to navigate your way in an organization is a skill. And I do think a significant part of that as well is that we are competing against people whose identity is almost entirely based on their career. So if I'm a Muslim, right, I'm a software engineer. Okay. I cannot go home and code 8 hours into the evening and, go to work, code for another 8 hours and attend lots of meetups and then get married at 40 years old or 50 years old, like a lot of these guys do. Because my deen requires me that I have to be part of my family. I've got lots of other responsibilities. And I think a lot of Muslims find that difficult because we are competing against people that can give everything to their career. So there is an element of that as well. I think that's going on there. But I think the big one is we need to be more cohesive as a community and pass that knowledge down to make it easier for people to progress. Because as I say, we have got so much talent in our community, and it's just unrealized.
Particularly within tech as well. I know it's probably not so you've mentioned it's not happening on a wholesale level, at the top level, gradually, very, very, very slowly. Is it fair to say that there's a few that are doing things a little bit differently? Because I'm aware of some people in other cities who have, compared to when I started my career, the number of partners within consultancies, for example, that were Muslim, there weren't many.
Yeah.
There weren't many, but now there's a lot more. It's much more diverse.
Yeah.
In some areas, there's still a fair bit of
and that whole diversity agenda is helping as well. So, a friend of mine, he works in mergers and acquisitions, and he was saying that there's consultancies like KPMG that are actively looking for aspirational young Muslims to take on as apprentices. Now, you can argue whether the reasons are entirely altruistic or whether it's a little bit of box ticking, but we've got to take advantage. It's a good time, I think, now to try and get ahead in the corporate world as a Muslim, because companies want to be seen as promoting you.
So for diversity and stuff, though, tick the boxes.
But hold on, so there's literally a scheme for young Muslims, or there's a scheme?
It's not a scheme for young Muslims. There's an apprenticeship scheme, but they have targets to get people from underrepresented backgrounds, deprived backgrounds.
Okay.
Actually, Muslims generally, a lot of us do come from deprived backgrounds. So the barriers to entry are a lot lower now than
right. Gotcha. And there's a few companies doing a similar thing, right? Where they're targeting people from, and that was one of the things that's happening in Canary Wharf as well. Where so you've got, it's much more accessible. So like you said, the barriers to entry are a lot lower, and then you've got that mentorship. So you've got this real good cross-pollination going on between the two. So that's certainly helped. A little bit about your background, right? So we know what you're doing at the moment.
We're going to go deep.
We know we can get as deep as you like.
Yes.
But so tell us, what was it like growing up? Because we're kind of the same age, same city. We experienced similar things. A few years younger.
He's having to think about it.
Yeah, a few years younger.
Okay.
A few years younger.
37.
37. But around the same time, similar challenges that we would have had to deal with. What was it like growing up in Nottingham back in the 80s, 90s?
Yeah, it was, like I said, very, very different to now. Like very different to now. I think when I was growing up, the only Muslims were Pakistanis and Bengalis. There weren't.
And even the Bengalis, there weren't many. There weren't many back then.
No, they stood themselves.
I think there's so many Pakistanis we just didn't.
It's honestly, I do say this to my kids, like when we were growing up. So it's so different because, like for me, I don't know, I can't speak for other people, but we had a big affinity for the Asian culture, not the Muslim culture. It was the Asian culture. So we used to have like events in Nottingham called, I don't know, you're probably too young for this, but it used to be something called Bhangra Heatwave, which was like a annual Bhangra event at the University of Nottingham, and that was the identity. You're Asian, you at curry, your parents hit you with slippers, and you like Bhangra music, right? So, and this whole notion of kind of being Muslim, it was there, but it was nowhere near as strong as a an identity factor as it is now.
Do you remember the Goodness Gracious Me sketches?
Yeah.
So around, it was late 90s, and that brought together that whole Asian culture and just tapped into this zeitgeist at the time that everybody's experiencing, but we've never seen it.
And our cultural experience as Muslims was very similar to the cultural experience of Sikhs and the Hindus, because, you know, to the outside, we were just Asians or Indians. And that was, so I think what I'm trying to say is, as I was growing up, you know, the Muslim part of your identity wasn't as strong as I think it is for young people now. And, you know, it meant that the good things, it meant that you had a very wide range of friends. I had lots of Hindu and Sikh friends as I was growing up. And I think it was when I went to university and I got involved in the Islamic Society in the University of Manchester that really kind of ignited the kind of dean side of me. But
I'd say that's the same for me as well, actually. I think university plays a big part in that. If you get involved with the Islamic Society, you sort of find...
Yeah, but then you go too far the other way.
And kind of thing, it's one of those places where you sort of find yourself at university. That's what they say, isn't it? When you get to university, for those who weren't practicing beforehand.
Yeah.
Maybe,
but for me, it was really interesting because then when I went there, and I was like, oh my God, you know, there's like Muslims that are like, you know, a bit more like me. You know, I was always a bit of an odd one out because I wasn't... because of my parents' divorce and what have you, I didn't hang around with a lot of Muslims as I was growing up. But then I went to university and I met loads of, you know, Muslims that were very, very different to some Muslims in Nottingham. And I was like, I love these guys. I don't want to hang around with anyone else. So this is honestly no word of a lie. In my 3 years of university, I don't remember a single non-Muslim name of anyone that I hung around with because it went from one extreme to the other. Which I look back on and I kind of regret because I'm like, okay, it was a bit naive of me. Like, you know, there's a whole world outside of Muslims as well, but it's just one of those things. But yeah, I think growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was a very strange time if you're a Muslim in Nottingham. Lots of competing forces, and you had that very traditional kind of family structure. So like I said, my mum got divorced when I was like 11, 12, and it was a huge issue, like ripped our family apart. Half the cousins that I spent my time growing up with, I never pretty much saw again for several years. So, and you had that really traditional side of the culture there, but then you also had this, you know, you wanted to be part of the UK, you wanted to, you know, get a good education and get a job. And then the English culture was very, very discriminatory and very kind of exclusionary for, you know, people like us. So you were, you know, stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think anyone who's my age, who's grown up, I think they can relate to that kind of identity crisis that a lot of us went through.
Do you think, obviously, with your parents' situation, do you think that helped with your drive in trying to become successful? Because obviously, without your dad being around, it could potentially mean that, okay, you need to sort of step up.
I think maybe. I think it can have, you know, one or two effects. It can either give you a reason to decide that your life's already screwed and this is the way it's going to be. Or for me, it was a case of, well, I can't depend. And I know it sounds bad, it sounds arrogant, but for me, it was like I can't depend on anyone else to kind of take control of my life because the adults in my life have got their own things going on. I've got to take control of what I need to do. So
that's quite deep, man. At what age did you come to that realization? I mean,
very young.
That's
very
wow.
Yeah, very young. You know, like I said, any kid of a Muslim divorce in those times would be able to relate that it was like, we don't do amicable divorces. I think Muslims generally don't do amicable divorces anyway. But back then it was very acrimonious. Like I said, family was split apart. My mum was very isolated. You know, I was in a house with me, my mum, my sister, so I didn't have any male role models. So I think for me, the way it manifested itself was like, okay, well, you know, you're just going to have to kind of do this yourself and decide what you want to do and just get on and do it. And alhamdulillah, in a way it was positive because it meant I did well academically. I had a real focus that I didn't want to just be a kind of statistic. But then it has its costs as well, doesn't it? You know, in that like that kind of lack of identity and knowing who and what you are.
What pearls of wisdom would you offer? Because things have changed since then, and I know how much of a taboo it was considered back then.
Yeah.
It's still a taboo now, maybe not as bad. Back then it was pretty, it was unheard of, even though there's major fractures in a marriage.
Oh yeah.
But you just don't you don't do the divorce and you just grin and bear it. That's what it was like back in the day. What advice would you give to somebody going through that now and just
I don't
it's happening.
I don't know if I'm qualified to give advice on anyone going through that now, because I probably can't relate too much. You know, like I said, my time was very different. But I think, you know, my advice would always be that, you know, these things that happen to us, they don't define us, right? And we're never entitled to go through life without problems. So my son, he's 17, for example, and he was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease just when he was doing his GCSEs, and it was very, very difficult for me to relate to him, because, you know, 16 years old, he's going through his GCSEs, and, you know, for him, his test was this illness. For someone else, it might be their parents going through a divorce. But the thing I said to my son is, you know, this is be easier for you if you just accept that we're never entitled to go through life without being tested. Your test has come now. Someone else's test, your friends, you might be looking at them with envy, but their test might come in 10 or 20 years' time, and it might be worse than your test. You know, we're always going to be tested. So take it for what it is, and it is a test from Allah, and in many ways, it may even be a mercy from Allah. Okay, and don't take it personally. Like, you just got to get through this.
That's beautiful advice, man. That's nice advice. Yeah. Allah tests the ones that He loves, and pressure makes diamonds, we're told.
Yeah, 100%. But we all do this, right? We all have this kind of we've got this voice in our head that somehow when we wake up in the morning tells us we're entitled to be successful, or have a great marriage, or have kids that listen to us, or have good health. And I think one of the things that I'm learning as I'm getting older, and I think it's nothing special to me, I think a lot of people realize this when they get older, is every day is a blessing, you know, and the less that you feel entitled to as you go through life, the easier it's going to be. So I'm just saying this is a reminder to myself more than anything else. But like I said, everyone's got that voice, you know, some people's is louder than the others, but we all feel entitled to things. But life doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think you got to be a bit careful about sort of coasting through life and not being grateful for what you do have. And as you said, with these tests, we all have our own tests, and I think sometimes it's just a reminder for us to, like, for whatever reason you may have sort of forgotten about Allah, or you're not feeling very close to Allah, and this comes around and this helps build that relationship back up again.
100%. One of the kind of like most impactful things that ever happened to me in my life was, it sounds really stupid, but I developed tinnitus. So you know what tinnitus is?
I'm gonna have to pause you one second. Tinnitus is terrible. We've got a caller on the line, and I've completely forgotten. Shafiq, are you okay? Hold on, wait. So Bismillah.
No, I try to the head.
We don't get many calls.
Okay.
So bear with me. Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
वालेकुम सलाम भैया जी कोई कैक फ्लाई जो इन्होंने मेला रखा है वो कौन सी जगह हो रहा है?
Brother, you're live on the radio at the moment. I don't know if you call the studio again.
Okay.
They can answer that question, inshallah. Yeah. Jazakallah khair.
You were getting really excited then, weren't you?
I was. Do you know? I thought that was auntie. That was pointing up. You know that.
Auntie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I thought she was going to compliment you and throw some praise on you. But anyway, sorry. Sorry. You're about tinnitus.
It sounds really silly, but you know, around the time that I set my business up, because it was really stressful, and I did get very anxious about life in general. I didn't actually realize, but if you get stressed and anxious, it can have physical manifestations, and weird things happen to your body. And for me, I just woke up one morning and it was like, I just got like a ringing in my ear. You know, and
just all of a sudden,
just all of a sudden, and I don't know if you've ever had it before, but you know, for most things you can escape, right? But a noise in your head is very difficult to escape, because you can't put a pillow over your ear, you can't lock yourself away. It's always there. So I found it really, really difficult. And actually, what really helped is just realizing that, you know, Allah's probably sent this as a message to you that your life isn't right. Like, you're not praying regularly, you're not grateful, maybe your relationship with your kids isn't right. And I realized that it was the lack of gratitude. I was feeling anxious because I wasn't grateful. I was looking at all the things that I didn't have, and it was that lack of gratitude, and that's where my anxiety came from. So the moment I started being more grateful for what I had, it was like a revelation. It was like, and I thanked Allah. I said, Allah, thanks for sending me that sign, right? You could have sent me a million signs, but you chose this one because it works for me. So, these things that happen to us, like, always happens for a reason.
Well, that's another call. I'm not going to answer it this time around, but may Allah make it easy for all of us, and sabr and shukr, and help us to be more grateful. There's one really beautiful thing that I came across, was if we were to have all the things that we were grateful for today, that we thanked Allah for, if we were to have all those things tomorrow, we'd end up with almost next to nothing.
Yeah.
Because we've been blessed with so much in this life, and there's such little gratitude for it. So, great lesson, important lesson for all of us.
And I just want to say in business as well, like, I run a business, and it's been a successful business over the years, but you always have a tendency, just because you set up a business, start making a bit of money, the tests don't go away, because there's always someone running a business that's more successful than you. There's always someone who's bigger than you. And again, that voice comes back, he's been running his business for 4 years and look at what he's achieved. You've been running yours for 8. And the trick is to, like I said, always center yourself and just feel like, look, life's a journey. It's not about the destination. It's about what you're doing today. And just be grateful for what you have. Do what Allah's blessed you with. Use the tools at your disposal, and stop comparing yourself to others. So if you're going through a divorce, as you say, like your kid's going through a divorce, kids' parents going through a divorce, my advice would be like, just see it as something that happens to some people. Don't look at the people that have got a nice family life and think, why haven't I got that? Because you'll never be happy. So,
one of the things that's helped me actually on that point is that when I do look at people who are more successful than me, I tell myself, look, I don't know what challenges they have. They might look successful, but they might be going through all sorts behind the scenes that you just never know. So I'd rather remind myself that, look, Allah's testing them maybe in some other ways that you can't physically see, but their tests are there. And they might look like, they're happy walking around, but they might be going through all sorts. And you just don't know.
100%. How many people do we know, and we hear about that, have supposedly everything in the world, and then the next day, unfortunately, they kill themselves. And then you'd swap position with them on the day before. You would swap position with them on the day after, would you? So, helpful to keep that always in mind.
It's a tough thing to accept, isn't it? I mean, particularly in this day and age, I don't want to come back to social media, because I find that most of our conversations come back to social media and just bashing young people.
Old uncles is just like moaning. You're only 37, man.
We are. I know. No, what on TikTok? No, I've still not figured it out.
Yeah, he's lying. He's got a secret TikTok.
I wish. No, still figuring it out. There's no TikTok in our house. But that doesn't help as well. There's a very artificial, manufactured, and this just fixation on the dunya as well. And in fact, we're looking to do a trip to Umrah. We've had this conversation about, well, actually, if we're taking kids with us, quite young kids, do we go for the luxury option? So, I mean, I've been in the past, and I've always gone for the most ghetto option that I can find, because it's the cheapest. And I've always been grateful for it. It's like, well, actually, do we go for something a bit more comfortable this time? It's like, well, what lessons are going to teach the kids that this is how you do them? And it's like, okay, right, well, we need to get that balance right.
Yeah.
Because there needs to be a level of difficulty in life for you to not get too comfortable and to fixate on the dunya. That is us finished for the week. As an absolute pleasure having you in the studio, my brother.
Time's flown by.
Our extra special guest. I added the extra on this time. Like the Azar extra special range. Listen, my brother, that's you.
Waitrose, bro.
Yeah, Waitrose. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
Some great stuff. That's us signing off for the day. The brother that's been trying to call about the Mela taking place, if you call again in about 30 seconds, I think somebody will be able to answer the phone. But Jazakallah khair, thank you for listening. That's us signing off from the Verbal Outpost. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.